And I want to review the structure of the if block. Okay, so the if block, remember, is what's called a branching control structure. It is not the only branching control structure, but it is the most common branching control structure. Um, Next week, we're actually going to get into a different kind of control structure called looping, which allows us to execute code multiple times. Today, we're going to talk just briefly in a way of review about the if statement and how the if statement works. You'll remember at the end of each if line, there's a colon, and anytime you see a colon, there should be at least one line below it that is indented. I had more than one person text me or email me over the last couple of days saying, I have my if statement with the colon, but I'm getting an error when I run it. And the reason they were getting an error is because they didn't have an indented line beneath it. So Python will not like it if you don't have at least one line indented. Okay, and you shouldn't indent unless you're writing code that's part of a block, such as an if statement. Now remember, we expanded on that. We have actually three types of branching here. The if is always required in an if statement. Now that kind of sounds obvious, I know, but you always have to have an if. You always have to have an expression here. If you don't have an expression, you'll get an error. The expression will evaluate to true or false one way or another. And remember, true or false is really just a different way of saying something or nothing. Okay? elif always comes after an if. It cannot stand on its own. But in an if-elif situation, you can have unlimited elifs. Okay? You can have one or more elifs. And each elif requires an expression. Basically, it's saying, if this is true, then do this. Otherwise, if this is true, then do that. And then finally, of course, we have the else, which is, if none of these are true, do this thing. Please remember that in any if, elif, else, you don't have to have an else, first of all. Else is not required. Elif is not required, but you can have more than one. You can have only one else and only one if. Your conditions, your expressions, should be set up in a way that no more than one of them could be true. The main reason for that is that if you don't do that, you're going to get some really weird results in your code. Because if this can be true and this can be true, it's like trying to drive your car down two different streets at the same time. You can't do it. You have to pick one, and Python's always going to just go with the first one. So if this is true and this is true, this is still not going to get executed, because as soon as it finds something that's true, it will skip the rest of the code. If it can't find anything that's true, it will execute the else. If there is no else, it'll just keep right on going to the next line.